Greetings and welcome once again to legalizefreedom.com. I'm your host Greg Moffat, and my guest today is Neil Kramer, who joins us to discuss his current book, The Unfoldment, The Organic Path to Clarity, Power and Transformation. The Unfoldment presents a body of sacred wisdom and a deep spiritual perspective that puts real power and real magic into the hands of those who seek a path of awakening. The author draws on a lifetime of spiritual encounters and experiential gnosis to formulate a unique synthesis of metaphysics, mysticism and esoteric knowledge which provides genuine, hands-on tools and teachings for transformation and enlightenment in the 21st century. Hello and welcome Neil Kramer, and thank you very much for joining us today on legalizefreedom.com.
Hi Greg, it's good to be with you.
Now, Neil, we're here today in general to discuss your recent book, The Unfoldment, which subtitle is The Organic Path to Clarity, Power and Transformation. Before we dive right into it, perhaps you could just give listeners a little overview of what the book's dealing with.
Sure, the book is an exposition really of a modern journey of awareness, wisdom and esoterica. So it's my attempt, in a way, to breach an audience of people who are interested in an alternative view of the universe and maybe know a little bit about metaphysics, maybe know some science, some quantum physics, maybe a little mysticism, maybe they're also interested in spirituality. And this is my sort of contemporary synthesis of a number of those things, but with a particular focus on philosophy and mysticism, which for me go pretty close together, pretty hand in hand. And I think that some of the material that I use in it from a very controversial sources and from the ancient world, and as I say, very esoteric stuff, is like frighteningly pertinent to some of the mess that we find ourselves in today, politically and military and corporate, and all kinds of problems with personal freedom and legislation that tips the balance in favor of corporations rather than individuals. So there's a very practical reflection of this philosophical text in our day-to-day lives. And anybody who is familiar with what I do, and for those who don't, I pretty much insist that any philosophy must be infused into the felt experience of what you actually do on a day-to-day basis. It's not just like some nice ideas in a page. It's different ways of actually being, different ways of actually creating different realities. So it is a transformative book, and obviously the publishers put their spin on it to make some sales and get it in front of people, which is fair enough. But it is quite transformative, and the reports I'm hearing back from a lot of the people reading it are finding that, in that if you really go into it, and you really kind of go into the various layers of the book, it changes things, and that pleases me.
Well, it absolutely does. Now, the thing that drew me into it initially, when I just picked it up and I kind of turned it over and then, opened it, whatever, a random page, was things that I'd been grappling with all my life. And there were the big three questions in my mind, and perhaps universally so. Why are we here? Where do we come from? Where are we going? And you describe in the book how the pattern that so many of us seem to live, particularly in the industrialized world, but that pattern that will be familiar to us all of work, rest, eat, sleep, repeat. And then the realization of sort of saying to yourself, what is this for? And this is something I asked myself when I was at school. Why are we doing this? And then that leads you into the realm of philosophy by its definition it does. And those three big questions that we might come to ponder, that you expand upon at length and in all sorts of interesting directions in the book, we have no time to contemplate these because work, rest, eat, sleep, repeat takes over.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the fundamental sort of pivot of the whole book, really, which is one sits back from life and, you have a moment of repose and you just ask yourself, what is this all for? What is this for? What is this existence for? And I found it as a young man unacceptable that the answer was, well, nothing really. And I also found it unacceptable to say, well, to pass on genetic material which is the sort of, very, very reductionist scientific perspective. And I found those not necessarily uncomfortable. I kind of wouldn't care necessarily for some reason, but just unsatisfactory. I didn't buy that as a very young person. So one goes on various journeys and you have late night conversations and you read a few books. And for a lot of people, that's maybe how it continues. And you, as you say, with the industrial Protestant work ethic of go to work and be productive and shut your mouth, you don't have a lot of time for contemplation. And again, that's something that, for whatever reason, I chose to reject that restriction. And so I did everything I could to create an existence, a life where I created the time to examine and look at those questions in a serious way, not in a necessarily academic way or an overly scholarly way, but in a very human way, to think, right, I am going to actually think as best I can and penetrate this mystery of what the hell this is all about, what's going on, particularly because having lived in England for 35 years until I moved to the States in recent times, England had become a fascist state, and I don't think there's any argument against that anymore. And the only surprise at that is how cleverly it's crept upon people. And I think it's the same in many places in Germany and France and Italy and Scandinavia. And I thought, that's odd. That's like a very stark contrast to some of the intelligence and enlightenment and capabilities and capacity we have for thought and creation and constructive ways of being. And yet here the government structures are squeezing more and more out of people, leaving them with less and less. And I felt that was very, as I describe it, inorganic, very unnatural. I don't think that is what normally happens when human beings are left to their own devices. So this book is my synthesis of why that's happened and what we can do about it. And to put it in a nutshell, what you can do about it is transform yourself, because that is how you transform everything around you. So every time you speak to somebody, do something, pay a bill, go to the laundrette, go to the corner shop, whatever. If your consciousness is operating at a higher level, that has a physical effect on the world around you, which again, I go into the details of how and why that is. And you don't even have to open your mouth necessarily. It's not like we're going to suddenly become preachers and go around trying to wake people up and all that nonsense. I totally disagree with that. I encourage people to entirely play their own game and get on with their own stuff and their own unfoldment, as it were, their own awakening, their own process of development. But as you do that, you realize that you start to magnetize experiences that are complementary to that, i.e. you meet certain kinds of people, you go on certain sorts of journeys, certain breaks, good breaks come your way. And again, there's that synchronous aspect to the journey. And plus the fact, and this is something that I'm very keen on extrapolating from the process of awakening, which is a lifelong process. It doesn't necessarily ping into somebody's head at any time. It takes a long, long time. On that journey, the world becomes more magical, which is a very unfashionable and funny thing to say in post-industrial Europe and America. Magic, it's a funny word, isn't it? And yet, undeniably, as I've gone about my journey, I have seen more magical things and experienced more paradoxical events than is due to a normal guy my age from my background. It's just unbelievable. So the world beckons people who go on this process of discovery. It says, yeah, this is actually what it's for. This is what it's for. It's for growth. It's for evolution. And I feel that the universe is doing that itself. The universe is evolving and growing. And when it sees someone else evolving and growing, it supports them in that. And it says, hey, when you're aligned, when you calibrate yourself to the same thing, we can support each other. So as I often say, the first time the universe sees you is when you start your own process of ascendance, of awakening, of personal development, of inner discovery, whatever you want to call it, the real stuff of being a human being and asking the big questions and actually doing something about it, puts you in a harmonic relationship for the first time with the universe, and then it reveals more of itself to you.